And we'll make sure all that's working. I'll send that social out before we start. And we'll just have Mike join when Mike is able to join. I might have to leave the participants window open for a second.
Reed, I thought of another brought to you by, but it wouldn't be good for the show, probably.
Oh, well, then it's not very helpful. I mean,
I
the
know,
brought to you bys are for the show.
I mean, you may have used it, but I was thinking something about brought to you by NFL ratings plunging. At least MLS has a chance, or something like that.
That's funny. That is clever.
I mean,
enjoy that.
NFL took a bigger ratings dip than MLS did to start the season.
Really, I'm kind of surprised. I haven't really followed that. Let's see here. Social. Get the. We are live. That is good. Go there and mute, so it does not become heinous. Live chat. And come on. Come on. There we go. Give me the chat window. Thank you. Let's see. Preview episode. Tweet and retweet. And there we go. All right. Well, we will let Mike join when he joins, and we'll just bring him in at that point. So you guys ready?
Sure.
You got the rundown and everything, Blaine?
Yeah.
Good deal. Okay. Hello, fantasy managers, and welcome to the MLS Fantasy Insider. Tonight, we're going to preview Round 7 and the increasingly interesting and unexpected 2020 season of Major League Soccer. This episode is brought to you by Blowouts, making you regret the guys you didn't have on your team. No, ouch, that was kind of personal. No, I mean, brought to you by MLSFantasyBoss.com and the amazing MLS Fantasy Insider Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much. I'm your host, Reed Connolly from MLSFantasyBoss.com, and tonight I'm joined by my partner in fantasy, Mr. Blaine Riffle. Mike will be with us shortly. He's just running behind a bit tonight. We'd also like to welcome our special guest, Andrew Crowlard, a man of many titles in the past that's changed. He has been a fantasy blogger. He has been an r/MLS moderator, currently still is. He is a teacher of the beautiful game to children in Seattle, but he is also one of our Discord regulars in the chat and a great fantasy mind, and frequently in the chat with us during our live show. So welcome, Andrew. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm good.
Doing all right. I think the only reason you invited me on is so I would stop heckling you guys in the chat. So
No, I love
can't do it so much live.
I love heckling. So the reason Andrew is with us tonight is because he got voluntold, which happens often, I think, for those of us. And Mike is coming, so we do this. Hello, Mike, and welcome.
Hello.
We just started, so you are perfectly in time. I was just saying that we invited Andrew to the show tonight because, as so many of us who are on Zoom calls and have real person adult jobs understand, you often get voluntold when you have an idea and a suggestion. And that's exactly what Andrew did. He frequently does come onto the show and frequently does heckle us, which I very much enjoy because he heckled me some during this week that I'm going to let him brag about. And I loved it because I love hearing about people's successes in fantasy. And Andrew had a great suggestion for a new addition to our player recommendation section that we're going to be talking about tonight, which we'll mention shortly. So no spoilers just yet. But
Well, as someone who got voluntold into co-hosting this podcast, I do appreciate it.
that's right. That's right. That's how I've built this little empire here. So just voluntelling people who are fans and are willing to jump in on this. Andrew, question: people are wondering what your Discord name is.
My Discord name?
Mm-hmm.
Crawla. I am Crawla literally everywhere on social media.
So there that is. Now you have a face to the name, or if you're listening to us on the SoundCloud or any of your other favorite podcasting networks, a voice to the name. So I mentioned your success, Andrew. We're going to start tonight with our round 6 recap. So how did you guys do this week, Andrew?
I got 101 points this week.
Woo.
The changes boosted me just above the 100-point line. And 61 of those points came off of my bench. Massive.
There we go. Who was your bench?
Sounders.
There we go.
I had Jovan Jones, I had Rui Diaz, and I had Jordan Morris.
And I believe the message I got from Andrew this weekend was something along the lines of, "Hey, sorry, Reed, I hope you enjoyed my 50 points from Sounders." So it's like, and my response was, "Great, yes." Something like that.
I sent that at halftime, so that's why it was only 50 points
right.
in the trash talk.
That's right. It was early. It was early. Blaine, how did you do?
Not so hot. I got a 51 this week.
Oof. It's above the average.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's not saying much. None of my defenders hit. I got everything on the back line wrong. I somehow missed the lineup, and I had Greg Goose in there for the safety one, but instead of Molino, and I would have switched if I had seen it. So I missed out on 8 points there. Zardes was my highest scoring player for the week, so I mean that's a win for me.
Well, there you go. Mike, what about you?
I got 90 points.
There you go.
Which was wasn't too bad considering kind of how weird this week was.
Yeah.
I missed the RSL lineup in time. Like I was like, oh, look at LAFC's rotation. Oh, I'm bringing in Krylak and I'm capping him. And it was 8:30, which, the game hadn't kicked off yet, but as far as MLS is concerned, it had kicked off, so lineups were locked. So I missed out on those points, but like, all right, I'll just bring in Lidero because I had to swap out the Houston players, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I was able to catch those lineups, thank God. And I swapped into Lidero, which it's weird when you're disappointed at a 9-point captain, but whenever I woke up the next morning and saw the score, I was like, oh man, Lidero's going to have like double digits. It's going to be huge. And it's like, all right, Morris, Rui Diaz going down. Oh, there's Lidero.
Jovan Jones. Wait a minute. What's going on? Yeah,
so,
no.
I managed to get the wrong sounder for 9 points. It was a because MLS.
I was very happy to have his 9 points and 9 points from Rusnak.
Well,
so
if I had his 10 points, I may have actually made the Champions League. But
this you and Skylar, rough times.
Skylar has it worse than me, but we'll get to that.
Yes. So I was sharing this with Andrew before the show started. I had set my lineup during the show when we had it on Tuesday, and I was using my laptop when we did that, and I set it up, and I had Tinnerholm, and I had Abu Bakar, and I had Krylak on there, and I saved it. I was like, great. And so doing things with life, getting ready for the baby, doing stuff, I'm like, oh crap, games are starting, run up here 15 minutes before the games that I'm interested in are starting, and I'm trying to make sure everything's all set up, and I go and I changing my captain, and I accidentally hit clear team, and I'm like, no. So I'm like, back, do you want to save changes? No. Goes back, and it autofilled, and it saved an autofill, and I was like, no, I have 12 minutes before so I'm trying to remember what I did, recreate my team, and I did almost everything that I wanted, except I forgot to put in Abu Bakar, I forgot to put in Tinnerholm, and I put in Rusnak instead of Krylak. And it was I am the inspiration for the brought to you by this week, because I kept seeing these names pop up, and I'm like, yes, crap, no. I forgot that one. I did it. No, I switched that one. Crap. and I just went panic. So there was a heart attack and a heartache. I got 70 points, which is not horrible. It's not fantastic, and it's really weird because I feel like this season, since we've come back from the break, I've either gotten 70 points or a triple-digit score, and it's just weird. So it's like I've 70, okay. It's a weird like wheel that I'm in right now. So it's okay. Lidero succeeded for me. Resnight succeeded for me. I had Reynoso on the bench for Minnesota, who came in for me with 8 points. That was fantastic. I did get 7 points from Glad. The surprise of the night for me was Luis Robles. I had him on the bench, and that's how I started off, and he got that PK save. Had 9 points, and I was like, I will take that every single day. And that is, to transition into the next part of this segment, the general takeaway I have for people listening right now is when you're doing bench management and switcheroo management, you need to already have a threshold. And we've talked about some of those thresholds before on the show, but you need to have a threshold going into the week of what you are happy with, and you need to follow that. And for me, if I get a keeper who gets 6 points, I'm like, that is fine. That's usually going to be a clean sheet and at least 2 minutes of play. That's a guy who doesn't get any bonuses but probably got a clean sheet. If I get 6 or 7 points from a keeper, I am happy, and my keeper-roo is done, and you move forward. So seeing a 9-point keeper on my bench, I don't care if the next person gets a clean sheet, a save, and 5 bonus points, which would be the largest score for a keeper I've probably ever seen. It's just, you have to have that number in your mind when you're doing these switcheroos to just not overthink it. And that's what I did, and that's a big takeaway for me, especially when craziness happens. Guys, what about you? What are some of your takeaways from Week 6 of MLS Fantasy?
Atlanta sucks.
Yeah.
I was looking at some of their stats on the season, and over half of their shots are from outside the box. The last team that I was able to find that did that was, I think it was Granada in Spain a couple of years ago, and they finished dead last and scored like 12 goals less than anybody else. So Atlanta is in real trouble.
And it's trouble on both sides of the ball. Whenever Dax McCarty puts up, 18 fantasy points, like something is seriously wrong, because he had a goal and 2 assists, I believe.
Right, I think this was a career high for him. So yes, it was a wild night, to be sure. Seattle Sounders is definitely something we can let Andrew speak some of this too. A fantastic score, speaks definitely to the quality of a lot of their team, and that Seattle has finally realized that this, in fact, is the end of the season and it's time to turn it on, unlike the MLS is back tournament. But also there was rotation with that San Jose team, so I don't think we're going to expect Seattle to put up 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 goals here on out, but it's definitely helped the stock for a lot of their players. Would you agree with that, Andrew?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, San Jose, along with a couple other teams, just can't defend people that run. It's become a really interesting issue, especially in the Western Conference. I've noticed several teams just cannot defend people with speed who try to run in behind, and San Jose is definitely one of those.
And I know we were really betting against San Jose, but they switched things up, and when they played against LA, it was a 0-0 draw, which I think was a big heartbreak for a lot of people. I know I was expecting a lot more out of Leggett and Pavone at the end, but it's important to note that Chicharito and Giovanni Dos Santos did play in this game as well, so we'll be talking about rotations and lineup changes a little bit later in the show, so those are just 2 more names to keep an eye on when you're considering your LA Galaxy team and the impact that they could have on the players you want to select. Other
Are
impacts.
we going with the Galaxy is worse with Chicharito on it already?
I mean, maybe. Are you going to be on team? Are you team Pavone or team anti-Chicharito?
I mean, I don't know if I'm on a team yet, but
Okay.
it's a thought in the back of my mind.
I mean, maybe. I'm not seeing a lot of help with that. Another team I want to point out is Montreal. They had that mirror match game against Toronto, which they lost, but they did get a goal in there. And then they stomped Vancouver, which is not a surprise. But Vancouver did get a couple of goals on them, so there is some more consistency with Montreal that we're seeing when Piet and when Tyder are back in the team, unlike when they were both out. So Montreal, I think, does have some value to them under the right situation, fantasy-wise, when you look at that. Let's see here. Going through, we saw some good results from Minnesota, and then a very weird game against Sporting Kansas City. Do you want to mention that one, Blaine?
No, you haven't mentioned that one.
Oh, do you want to talk about it? Because I know there were some injuries, and there was no, the red card was in New England. There were mostly some injuries and weird rotations in this one.
Yeah, well, Sporting had a COVID positive for one player that took him out, and we're dealing with injuries. But then Minnesota, I think, fielded 6 subs for the game, one of them being a goalkeeper, and they used all 5 of their bench players for this one. And then Hairston picked up a slight hamstring issue. He was grabbing at his leg, and they couldn't sub him off because they'd used them all, and they were out of subs. Yeah, this was a weird one. They defended well. I mean, Kansas City had the majority of the ball. Took them till late in the game to get the breakthrough. So Minnesota defended a whole lot better than I've seen them defend this season so far.
And what we
really
have in
good
chat,
showing there.
this is being called a B squad for Minnesota. And if that's true, is this worrisome for Sporting Kansas City going forward?
This was a B squad for Sporting too, in a lot of ways. I mean, you look at, they started 3 homegrown guys in Busio, Duke, and Hernandez in midfield. I mean, there's no Ilya, there's no Roger, or no, Kindo was in there, I guess. But they've been starting they've had 3 young guys playing a lot of minutes in midfield. It was kind of a B squad all the way around.
Very true.
Yeah.
We didn't have... go ahead.
Sporting has not been shut out this season. That is one thing that they've got going for them. They have scored in every game this season so far, so that's something to keep an eye on fantasy-wise. They always seem to find that one goal somewhere.
Then, of course, we have to give just a shout-out to Colorado, who put up 5 points against Real Salt Lake, who won the Rocky Mountain Cup for the first time in 5 years or something along those lines. I think it's the first time they've had a shutout at Rio Tinto, and they almost had a fight after the end of the game. So that... I think that second stat there was. I went through some quick stats about this game, and there was a lot of firsts and haven't beens for a long time for Colorado. So this was a great win for them. The most interesting part, or the funniest part, was when Real Salt Lake played Colorado earlier. They beat Colorado 4-1, and they went ahead and made a tweet that said "Rocky Mountain Cup champions, Real Salt Lake," and then they come and lose 5-0. And since the first game was thrown out for this COVID stuff, they lost it. So that premature celebration right there for sure. So yes. But good points there. They had a good showing from their newest acquisition. I don't know if this is the all aboard the Colorado train yet or not, but Colorado did have some momentum at the beginning of the season, and it's good to see them get some goals back on the sheet right there. Anything else you guys want to point out? Chat, anything you want to bring up before we move on to our housekeeping? Or just any general takeaways you guys wanted to talk about before we get on to housekeeping? And we definitely will talk about our double game situation coming up, if that's on your mind.
Well, speaking of clinching cups, as the way the schedule is right now, I clinched the new MLSFI Derby Cup.
No.
Because I think there's only one game that's going to happen between our teams. And I think... we won it. We were terrible. We should fire our coach, but we won it.
Well played.
Since he scored, so
yes, yes, you.
So you're second.
I am.
I guess.
That's right.
Maybe...
I'm number 2.
Blaine is last. Sporting Kansas City just can't keep up.
Yeah.
This has been the weirdest thing for me with FC Cincinnati, and I don't know if this just. I don't know what this says about me, but I read articles and I read things from like Doyle, and they're talking about how Cincinnati is not doing very well, and this isn't the kind of rebound they'd expected. And I'm like, I am ecstatic. Every time I look at the score, and it's like, FC Cincinnati didn't lose. All right, guys. Good job. And my wife goes, did they win? And I'm like, no. They just didn't lose. and that's
Or
a
they
win in
didn't
my
lose
book.
by like multiple goals.
Right, they only lost
'Cause
by
they lost
by
this weekend.
one.
This week,
Yeah, they did. They did. They lost 2-1. New York's been on a little run, so I mean, maybe this just talks about how little I was expecting after the catastrophe that was the inaugural season. But like, we get 1 point, and I'm like, nice, excellent.
But Reed, you got to keep it in perspective too. One win, and you can leapfrog all the way up into 9.
That's true. That's true.
I mean,
that's what happens.
You stand
You
one
were
or
in
two
playoff
wins, you're late,
contention.
You're in the playoff.
That's right. I mean, there was some definite flubs in here. Connections with our off the break aren't fantastic. Maybe they can learn some from Andrew. He can help with that. But there's definitely some offensive worries with Cincinnati, which, from the fantasy point of view, this is kind of what we expect. They've shored up on defense, so I don't know if Cincinnati's a team you bet against every week for just a 7-1 or a 5-0 type score, but you're definitely not picking their attackers. Definitely
And I mean,
not.
the other thing Cincinnati's got going, I don't know why the people don't pick up on it. You're not getting embarrassed like Atlanta and DC.
And I got me some good fantasy points from Boston a couple weeks ago. That's true. That's true. Well, all right. This was just a very crazy round, but we're seeing a lot of goals. We're not seeing a whole lot of clean sheets, and so if you are clean sheet hunting, you should probably stop and maybe look more at people who can help you with some goals. And I think Andrew will be having some numbers for us in our player picks section, so we look forward to seeing about that. Let's move on to the housekeeping section. This is round 7 that starts on Wednesday, September 16th, and this is a average double game week. We'll decide if it's a mediocre or what kind of value that it has shortly. But this round goes from September 16th through September 20th. And then the heads up for the next round, for round 8, starts on September 23rd. That is another Wednesday. So make sure you have team set. If you look into the schedule section of the fantasy website, we do have games for round 7 to round 8. We do not have games for any round past 8, unless you want to go to the final round, and then we can see LA Galaxy playing Seattle. That's the only game. But as far as anything useful, we have game information for 7 and 8, but nothing else yet that we can share for any pre-planning that you may want to do. The teams that have a double game week, and Mike, correct me if I've missed anything here, we have Dallas, Colorado, San Jose, Portland, Vancouver, and Montreal. I think we have everything updated on the schedule. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. It wasn't updated like right at 9 o'clock, but like it was updated by 9:30.
Of those teams, the team with a double home game is San Jose, for whatever that's worth. And then the teams with 2 double away games are Colorado and Portland. Everybody else has a 1 home, 1 away. And every other team is a single game week. Nobody's on a bye, so everyone's playing this week. If you're looking for a switcheroo for this round, or just not a switcheroo, sorry. If you're looking for just a scrub player on your bench, you're going to, again, want to look at the teams who play later. In this case, it's probably going to be Philadelphia that you would look at if you want to have a scrub player, because Montreal does play the first game, so I guess if you feel really lucky and that you're going to get a 4.0 scrub out of Montreal who won't play both games, which is possible, but you won't be able to do any changes with him. So you're probably going to want to look at Philadelphia, maybe LA Galaxy or Colorado. Colorado's double game. Philadelphia or LA Galaxy for your better switcheroo options to have the scrubs to give you, just free up that budget. It's right there. You can find some cheap players for sure with those teams. Let's see here. That's what I have for double games. Any other updates you guys have or injury news before we move on?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of little things to update just since we haven't covered on the pod.
Good.
For injuries, Max Morales came off early for New York City. That's the biggest fantasy injury news that I saw this weekend. I don't think there are any major red cards or yellow card suspensions that I know of. As far as kind of some other news kind of going around the league, Albert Elise is probably played his last game for the Houston Dynamo. If you got caught in that trap, you know this well, but he's supposedly going to be transferred to Portugal. Pending the official transfer, he's not going to be playing for Houston, so I wouldn't have him on your team. Other big news that kind of came out that will affect some things. MLS finally confirmed the playoff structure. This may impact whether teams are going to rotate. Essentially, what's going to happen is that the West, the top 8 teams are going to make it. For the East, the top 10 teams are going to make it, with slots 6 through 10 having essentially a playoffs play-in game for those last 2 seeds to make it a nice even 8. So as of right now, pretty much everyone is mathematically in it, except for maybe like San Jose and Vancouver in the West. But everyone in the East is in it, like within 2 games. So everything's to play for. We'll see how that impacts how teams are playing for the rest of the season. And then MLS did announce some of the games in Phase 2. And the announcement particularly was what they're going to do with the Canadian teams. As of right now, Vancouver, when it plays a home game, this is not for the first game for Wednesday, but after this, like for the weekend, Vancouver's home games are going to be in Portland. Montreal's home games are going to be at Red Bull Arena, and Toronto's home games are going to be in Hartford, Connecticut. So starting this weekend, so like for example, Montreal against Philadelphia Union, that's going to be at Red Bull's Arena. I think that's the only one that kicks off. Yeah, the other 2 Canadian teams are on the road this weekend. That'll be more impactful next weekend. And then finally, kind of a general housekeeping note, all the teams that have double game weeks this week have a double game week next week, because next week is a massive double game week. So this stuff to keep in mind as we start our conversation about player picks.
Yeah, we had a few red cards as well. Last week we had New England. Matt Polster got 2 yellows, and he was issued a red card. Over in Vancouver, Cavallini got a red card, and also for Montreal, Emmanuel got a red card as well. I didn't check for others, but those are a few of the red cards that are out if you're looking at some of those players. I don't know why you look at the Vancouver ones, but you never know.
Also, Miami signed Higuain, but he is in 14-day quarantine, so he won't be available next week. I don't think he's been added in the game yet.
Not the Higuain we're used to, his brother.
Yeah.
Make that point. Make that distinction.
Mike, did you mention Andrasic is out at Dallas?
I did not.
Yeah, he got transferred out of Dallas this week as well.
I think we've mentioned it that Reggie Cannon has officially been transferred out. I know the transfer got official, but I think we had mentioned it on the last podcast. But just in case we didn't, he's officially gone now.
And then, Andrew, I believe you shared some potential news that the smoke might have impacted the games last week. Is there anything that you've heard about the fires and impacting this week?
No, I think looking any more than 2 days out, it's too unpredictable. So it's super smoky here right now. My practices for the week have mostly been canceled. But as far as the weekend goes, your guess is as good as mine.
So yeah, keep up on that. Definitely our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone impacted by the fires. But it does have some impact, and so that is just a factor. Not mean to make light of it, but that is a factor that could impact some games going forward. All right. Seeing as, let's check chat real quick. Got everything covered there. So, seeing as nothing else for our injury updates, let's move on to our player pick section. We're going to kick this section off talking about double game weeks. That is the most common question I got this today when I sent out the tweet for questions and feedback that people might want to have for the show, and it was various versions of is this a good game? Is this a good week to go heavy with double game week players? Is there going to be rotation of the double game week players? What's happening with players during the double game week? So, guys, where do you come down on double game week players in this round? Are we potentially looking at rotations? Is the first game going to be better than the second game? Is it going to be teams when they go on the road that's going to be it, no matter which game it is? How are you seeing the congestion of double game weeks impacting players this week? Mike, let you start out.
I think at this point, with as many games as these teams are playing, I think every team with a double game week, from here on out, you have to be concerned about rotation. We started to really see it this week. And I think the new playoff structure is one of those where unless you're a team kind of fighting to get in it, most teams that you're probably going to want fantasy players from feel okay with I can lose a game here and there if I need to keep my guys healthy. I'm expecting to see more of those. Where they're going to come from, I'm not sure. This is an unprecedented situation. I can't predict reliably. I think this is one of those where you really need to pay attention to Wednesday. And the approach I've been really more taking is if I don't see a player start on Wednesday, I'm not banking that they come back in on the weekend. I got burned a few weeks ago with Nani. Like we've said before, you're not going to... Yeah,
Quintero, sorry, not Kyoto.
Quintero. We get... injury reports are at an all-time low, which is incredible to think about, but you can't see practices. You're basically relying entirely on what a coach is going to tell a reporter via Zoom. And that's not that's not dependable in any way. So in general, I think you have to look mostly at the Wednesday games, especially you need to be ready, I think, with one player from each team possibly to bring on in case we get another, they threw out the entire B team. I'm going to get this guy from Dallas, this guy from Colorado, even if they're not necessarily guys you would normally pick, and just try to take advantage of that. And hey, maybe the second game, that'll be a bonus. And this is where it'd be a good opportunity for the bench. If it's a player you're not familiar with, stash them on the bench, especially this week where you have just a few double game weeks teams. You can put that player on the bench, see how he does, and then maybe make adjustments after the Wednesday game. But that's kind of just in general. I don't think these double game week teams are great, especially with 2 double game weeks back to back. I think there's some single game options more so than in some weeks past. Generally, these teams aren't as good, plus schedule congestion. But those are some of the thoughts and strategies I'm trying to think of going into this. In general, if you can put them on your bench, that's better, but it kind of depends on how many double game week players you really want to look at.
Good night, Lily. Oh, she's upset. Andrew, since Blaine's got Lily, what are your thoughts on double game weeks?
Yeah, so I ran some numbers. Surprise, surprise, that's what I do. And double game weeks are significantly worse than they were under last year's rules for double game weeks. In the past, it's been a multiplier of about 50% bonus points. So if you got a score of 6 normally for single game week player, it'd be about 9 for double game week player. This year, it's only about 10 to 15% jump. So if you got a score of 6, it's generally about 6.5 for double game week players. So just in general, the scores for double game week players, the bonus just isn't there this year with the new rule. So generally, I'm starting at this point to just ignore double game weeks as a thing. Aside from worrying about rotations and just looking at the lineups and picking, the best matchup and values that I can find.
Yeah, no, I think that does reflect a lot of what we've seen, where maybe they'll get a 5-1 game and then a 6 or a 7 in the second game, and you think yes, but in the past you'd have been like, give me those money points with an easy 12 or something like that for a guy that had a couple of average games. Blaine, anything you want to add for double game weeks?
Yeah, I'm glad Lily came in because Andrew got to go first. I was waiting for those numbers because I've been kind of on that bandwagon already, actively ignoring double game weeks. I'm looking at matchups and I'm picking those. Like this week, we've got some interesting ones. Dallas plays the first game of the Saturday set, so you will be able to see both Dallas scores. So there is some options there for double game weeks, and I do look at that when there's a player or two that's a potential. But for the most part, we're seeing too much rotation, and the double game weeks, just the points aren't there on both games. The 2 bites at the apple doesn't seem to be a real thing right now. You're hoping for one good game out of the 2, and you're kind of expecting the second game to be a throwaway by the player, unless it's somebody specific. Like I would say, if Diego Valeri does not start the first game this week, I would assume he's going to go the second game. It's just kind of, there are certain teams that you could predict that way. But for the most part, I'm with Mike on that if they're not in the first game, I'm not going to take the risk for the second game because it's too easy to get burned.
Yeah, but it's a mirror match for Portland. I mean, they're literally playing San Jose twice at San Jose. So are they still... Here's my question. With this new structure we have, is Portland flying into San Jose on Wednesday, playing their game, leaving and going back to Portland, only to fly back into San Jose again on my birthday on Saturday, and then fly back out again? Like, that just seems ridiculous that they would be like, well, you guys just get a hotel and quarantine here, I guess. I don't know. But that's... The schedule is bananas this season with all these mirror matches that we're getting. I think I called it something else in the past, but for some reason I had Mortal Kombat on the brain, and I'm calling it a mirror match right now. So that's that's what we're going. I like what Patrick said. I think you guys make some fantastic points, and I think that's the right advice for anyone listening to us this week. I love this structure still. I love this change with the double game weeks, and I think it's kind of a weird example this year to see it, because in a normal year we'd see the double games would definitely be more spread out. We'd see teams with buys, and so there'd be a team that could potentially have that double game week and a bye next week, and the rotations might not be as severe. Sometimes when I'm looking at these teams as well, even though I know rotations might be a risk, if I like both matchups, I'm like, well, they'll probably play in one of them, so I'm willing to risk having the guy with that. And a lot of it's easier to do some of these double game week players with defenders, because most of them aren't as likely to rotate, though we have seen some rotations on defense as well, for sure, especially those guys who are on the wings. Most of the center backs seem to be okay, but then we have that continuing conversation of wing backs versus center backs, and what kind of bonus points are you actually looking for? Do you have any numbers with that, Andrew, for the rotations with wing backs and center backs? Too specific?
Not at this point. I haven't looked at numbers for comparing those two, no.
But still defenders seem to be a little bit consistent. I mean, I guess the most consistent is you're probably not going to see a goalkeeper rotation unless it's someone who's actually competing for the starting spot. So there's probably your safest double game week position right there. Anything from chat, feel free to chime in as we go on. Let's move right into our player picks, starting out with keepers and defenders. Blaine.
Yeah, this was a rough week. I didn't like any of the matchups too much. The ones that might line up okay, like I do kind of like Columbus, Nashville, but the prices there are insane. You're looking at paying $10 million for a defender, and goalkeepers are, what is it? Rooms at 9. So, I mean, your starting keeper, like, that's just a lot of money to invest in a defense at this point, when there's a lot of midfielders are going way up in value right now. So I'm going to go with Zobek on the bench for my goalkeeper. I'll see both scores. Colorado's hit or miss. I'm really looking at that first game, but I mean, you never know. Kansas City's missing so many players. They almost didn't score against Minnesota, and one goal late when they should have scored a bunch. That's a team that's just not capitalizing. If they're gonna get I'll take that risk because I'm rolling in. If I have the money at the time, I'll go with Room for Columbus, but right now I've got it on Teton for Cincinnati. Price is right for where my team's at, and it's one of the better matchups I see. Every other game I see some goals coming both directions, or I'm using roster spots from the 3 spots from the other teams somewhere else. So I'm kind of going there, and then same way. I'm going to go with one Columbus defender. I've got it on Williams for now. I've got Hollingshead in there for the double game week. I really want to see that line up. He could do some damage against Colorado, and I like that one. And then I'm going to go with I think Pedersen for Cincy is also on my bench right now, just to see kind of what happens. He's a cheap option to get into the Cincinnati defense, and I was really looking super cheap here because I spent way too much money up front, and so I had to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel. So I'm giving you guys the cheap option. Hopefully somebody's got some heavier hitters, but that's just the way my team shaped up.
Mike.
All right, so I have the keepers. I have Robles on the bench. We've talked about, Andrew made that great point, a great stat about Atlanta's offensive problems. So he's first, and then in the second part of the keeperoo, I have 9.2 million in Andre Blake. Montreal's schedule is really, really bad. And, they have to play Wednesday in Vancouver and then fly across the continent to a quote home game in New Jersey. So I don't really like that schedule for them. Philly's pretty strong, so I'm invested a lot in Philly this week, as you'll listen to my picks. Keeping on that, I have Gaddis from Philly. 6.5 was probably the cheapest way into the Philly defense. There were some other Philly defenders I would have liked more, but I was kind of budget constrained. If that Robles one hits, I can maybe upgrade to one of the better defenders for Philly. Also have Kyle Duncan. I picked the other side of the Cincy Red Bulls game, but I do agree with Blaine. I think it's a game where both teams struggle to score. Both teams are defensive first, so I can easily see that as a 0-0. I just happen to like Duncan a little bit better than in Cincinnati since it is Red Bulls at home. And then on the bench, I have Justin Glad. He's been putting up consistent numbers, except for that last game that RSL played. And because of that bad game that RSL had against Colorado, he actually lost a lot of value. We talked earlier about value. And I think this was one of the examples where like one bad game knocks that defender right back down. So he's down to 6.8, which I mean is still traditionally high, but with some of the other prices hasn't been too bad. And taking Vancouver again in the middle of back-to-back double game weeks in the altitude at RSL, I think that's a pretty good matchup for him. And then I have Mavinga. DC United is also another team that has really struggled to score. Toronto hasn't been as good defensively recently, but I think they can kind of get their form back, especially with a little bit of rest. I see them getting a clean sheet in this game.
Andrew, who are you looking at?
For my keeper, I've got Zobek from Dallas. I don't think we've mentioned that Dallas plays twice this week before most teams play once. So we'll be able to get a peek at, the final score of whatever Dallas players do. So that is something to definitely keep in mind as you're looking at players. I've also got Awful and Camacho on my starting back line, and then I've got Adnan and Ziegler as well, which I will explain those two picks later.
Okay. Interesting that. You guys have thrown out a lot of good names. I have some overlap. Zobek is one that I was looking at. I wasn't sure about Zobek or sold on him yet. That being able to preview it was not lost on me, and I think that's a very important point for anybody listening to take away, is that you do get to see both Dallas games if the player plays both times, if they're on your bench, if you want to bring them in. I know that he had given up some goals last week in those two games, and so I wasn't sure. One of those was to Houston, I think. So I was a little wary about that. I was sort of taking a gamble in the same way. If you are looking for a budget player, maybe Yarborough over with Colorado plays Dallas at the first game, so you can see if that's going to work. But they do play against LA Galaxy, so you're almost banking on that first game to see if that's going to be your clean sheet. Though who knows? LA Galaxy, worse with Chicharito, maybe. That could turn out, but Abubakar's been doing pretty well, and they've had some decent defensive performances. So there's another name. Zobek wasn't one that I was throwing around with. I have Room as the switcheroo that I was looking at, just because I was betting against Nashville. They have put up a few goals. Columbus has not given up a goal at home. Nashville has struggled a little bit on the road. I think the performance from Dax is definitely a blip. That is not consistently what he does, or his position. That is not usually the goal scoring position that he is in. So I was looking at Room, 9 million, a little bit on the expensive side. The Robles shout out is a fantastic one to point out. I think also the Blake call out is another. Those are all fantastic options as well. And I went through some of those as well. Blake is a little bit harder to work with if you're trying to have someone like a Room. I think Blake is probably the best single game week keeper to have with your keeperoo, because you get to see anything, and then you can put Blake in on a solid game that's likely going to be. I would expect Montreal to rotate some in the second game. Charles makes a good point in chat that the game against Vancouver is likely going to be more important than Montreal, because that factors into the Canadian Cup placements, and so we could see a very hard fought game against Montreal Vancouver compared to what we might see with Montreal Philadelphia. Though that plays into MLS, so who knows what they're going to do there. But that's a very good point about the Canadian Championship, and I think just speaks to the quality of Philadelphia. Your defense are also great. A couple more that I'll throw out there. Aro has gotten some good bonus point production for Toronto if you want to go with him. Hollingshead's a great shout out. If you think Villafana is going to play, here's another situation where if you set up Gaddis on your team, he won't play. So on your field, he won't play until the very last game. So if you want to have Villafana on your bench, any of the double game week guys except for Montreal on your bench, you could see those points. And then you could just go with Gaddis, who is equally a strong contender, I think, for a spot, as Mike pointed out. So you could have Abubakar on your bench. You could have Villafana if you want to go for that and see their points. And so I have Villafana there right now just because I'm curious in what's going to happen with Portland, San Jose, since that's that back-to-back game right there. You mentioned Duncan, Mike, and I think it's important to point out, I totally get why you're going with Duncan. Cincinnati is not good at scoring, as we just talked about a little bit ago. They did beat New York in the MLSFI Cup, so maybe there's some bad blood there that they're going to want to take care of. We also have the USL Cup history, or US Open Cup history with them. But something I will point out about Duncan is his point total is very heavily weighted to the beginning of the season prior to the COVID break and MLSFI Cup. Since then, we've not seen that same kind of point production. Maybe you're just banking on the clean sheet for them. So I just want to point that out. People are looking at Duncan, seeing that huge score. It's a little artificial with sort of the new normal that we have. Other than that, I think you guys have pointed out a lot of great ones. Checking over at chat, various combinations of Cincinnati defenders. I've seen some lineups online where people have thrown in Columbus defenders. They've thrown in two, like an Awful and a Mensa, or getting in Williams or somebody there. So I think that's a very viable this week. People betting against DC United, also pretty viable almost any week as well. And then some different options with Dallas as well, going with Hollingshead or going with Ziegler. I have Hollingshead myself. Mostly that's a price thing because Ziegler is, I think he's 9. Is he 9-9 or is he pushing 10? Andrew? He's 9.
9-9. Yeah.
9, yeah. I thought he wasn't quite in the 10, but he's had some great performances, and I love your Glad shout out, Mike. Yeah, he's I think he got 7 points last week, so great there. Did you want to talk more?
One last thing before we move on to midfielders. I was looking at the clean sheets this year, and they're down from what we've seen in the last couple of years. But it's all due to the Western Conference's inability to defend. The East, they're putting up clean sheets about the normal rate, and the West is down at about half the normal rate.
Oh, interesting.
So they've had about 100 games in each conference, and the West has put up 17 clean sheets, and the East about twice as many. So if you're clean sheet hunting, definitely look for teams in the East, and I think that's kind of also reflected in just the raw number of goals scored in each conference as well.
Oh, that's a great tidbit. Fantastic. Yeah, your 7-1 score really helped that stat right there. All right, let's go to midfielders. Mike, kick us off.
All right. I have some weird midfield picks. I'll start off with Tighter. I did bash Montreal in the last section, but Tighter has been generally pretty consistent. It's mostly based on his game against Vancouver. I do agree. That's why I think most of the points are going to come from. Then I have Bassett from Colorado. He's only 8 million. I think he's a newer player for them, but when he started, his points totals are 7, 6, and 14. He did rotate the last double game week against Houston, so that's something to keep in mind. But for 8 million, we're willing to have him on the team. Right now, I have Valeri as a placeholder. If he does not start that game against San Jose on Wednesday, he's immediately out. But I just kind of wanted to put him in to fit him in budget-wise. 2 games against San Jose with the goals that San Jose has generally been putting up, the LA Galaxy game notwithstanding, is too good to ignore for me. Then I have K. Marquet from LAFC. He can do okay against Seattle. Depends which Seattle game they get. It's either hot and cold for them. But he's only 7.5 following his red card. So he's a little bit cheaper with some high upside. And then I have Morgan from Miami. He's come on strong for them, averaging 6.63. Again, I don't like Atlanta on either side of the ball. So, for 9.5 for a 6-point average is pretty good for me.
Andrew, who do you like?
My midfield is Pozuelo. Even though I think his numbers have been propped up heavily, along with all of Toronto, by playing the two other Canadian teams over and over and over again. DC is equally, if not worse, than both of them. So going with Pozuelo. I've got Zelarayan from Columbus. I also have Lidero. And then my last midfielder right now is Rusnak, but that is subject to change.
What is it that you like about Rusnak compared to like Crowlard or some of the other options?
Just in general, he's been more consistent with bonus points historically.
That's fair. I think we mentioned last week that Crowlard tends to have maybe the higher ceiling, but he can be kind of boom or bust at times.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Blaine.
Yeah, I've got Pozuelo and Valeri both. Same basic reasoning. But I'm throwing in Pablo Piatti here. I'm actually really thinking I want to double up on Toronto against DC. I have not had any faith in DC's defense this year, and with the way Toronto's played, it's been a while since DC's faced an offense quite like this, and so I think this one's going to be primed where Toronto can just tear them apart, even though it's a road game for Toronto. I just got that gut feeling on doubling up here. I've got Lidero in there right now. I kind of want to see the lineups, but hangover games are kind of interesting. Going from a 7-1 win, things tend to come back down to earth a little bit. And I'm debating on the RSL thing because when a team gets completely crushed like that, they tend to bounce back pretty well. So that kind of gives me a little bit of pause with Valeri on that first San Jose game. Although San Jose's already had a game from that 7-1. So that may not be there. But I could see RSL really bouncing back on this one, and I don't want to miss out on those points if they do. Crowlard probably gets the nod on that one for me, just with the way they're going to play and the way that game shapes up. So that it may be Crowlard over Lidero. I'm just seeing a hangover both ways, and so I'm really nervous about Lidero on that. And then I've got a Jonathan Lewis on the bench for Colorado. He's 4.2, sometimes a super sub. I'll risk it for a 4.2, even if he doesn't start, because he's come in and made a lot of things happen. And when he gets to start, he's got some decent numbers. And just the price point there, I was a little short on budget with all the guys I had, so I was looking for some cheap options. And that's one that'll probably give me a few points on the bench and at least an option to sub in.
No, there's a lot of great picks you guys have hit. A lot of the ones that I was looking at. I think it's also important to point out that Atuesta came back into the game for LAFC in the second half. He had been out with an injury, so he could potentially be back in the mix. If you want to take that as a flyer, maybe. I don't know what kind of minutes he'll get. They don't have a double, so that could be good for him. I was considering Paolo for Seattle myself, comparing him to Lidero. Some of that was me reacting to that last game. He was getting very involved. Lidero wasn't as high with the points. He's had some good production since he's been in the season as well, and a lower price point. That's let me be honest. That's really a lot of what it was. He has some good numbers, and he's about $2 million less than Lidero. And so I was thinking that could be a pretty good shot right there. Andrew, do you have any opinions on Paolo versus Lidero?
Yes, I have many opinions on that.
Fantasy opinions on.
Yes, both are the same at this point. Paolo's better.
There we go.
Just straight up. Doesn't even matter about the value. He's just willing to take more risks and try to hit more final balls than Lidero is. Lidero is just a possession player up high. You see him kind of getting the ball like on top of the 18, but out in wide areas, just over and over and over again. And Paolo in general is more willing to hit balls into space to break open high press or to start counterattacks, which I think is going to be very relevant against LAFC this week, since they cannot for the life of them defend anything behind them. So I anticipate a couple players just running in behind for balls hit in over and over again.
Yeah, this may be a preview of what might be coming in forward section then from the sound of it. But so there we go. Some breakdown there with Lewis, or not Lewis, Mike. That was Blaine's pick with Paolo. I also am doing the same thing with Valeri, sort of having him there as a placeholder and seeing what could happen. I think Tyler's a great pick, especially mentioning the Canadian Championship impacts. I didn't catch that, so that does make me like Tyler. You can also look at Piet as an option. He's 9 and change as well. I think Tyler's the better option, but he has been very involved in their attack as well, especially since coming back. But I think Tyler's still good. Another player that I'm looking at on the cheaper side, this is potentially another switcheroo, is Galvin from Colorado. Mike's pick of Cole Bassett is fantastic. I have him on a short list as well. I think he's another good option. Galvin did get some points in this last game. It might have been his first game. He had one more. Let me check real quick. I've got him right here. He had the... this is his third game, but he only had 36 minutes, and he had a goal. And I think they're working him in, and maybe with this double he might feature both, is what I was thinking. But he's on my bench to see. But I might swap him for Cole because he has some more consistency right there. Let's see, is that all for my notes? I guess the other one I'll add, in and out of my lineup, I also had Aronson. Oh, and I have Memo. I have Memo on my team right now. It was just too expensive for me to try to work in Quintero this round. Got burnt on Quintero last week, so I am a little wary of what might happen, though this could be what they're saving him for. But Memo has some good consistent production with most of his games, and with Houston going up against Minnesota this week, I could change that position because Minnesota has done well. But I have Memo right there. He's 7.8, and so he was filling a sub 8 million point void that I had when I was making this lineup. So, but those are some of the other options. Anybody in chat has some suggestions? I know we've seen I've seen a lot of teams with RSL players, and I think you guys, Blaine, I think you touched on some of why that's making sense to a lot of people. I've also seen some teams with several San Jose players, like Soleas with Shea on there. I don't go for that one. Do you guys think San Jose has the double home this week? Are their players in any way attractive to you?
No.
Nope. I think
after getting shellacked so bad, it's tough to really trust them. I think it was Doyle's article this week was talking about just how much they miss Eriksson going forward.
Yeah.
And like San Jose, it's just kind of a mess right now. They haven't invested in the last couple of years. They're pretty much the same squad, and I think people have more or less figured out how to play against their weird man marking system.
So there we go.
Yeah, none of their players are producing consistently fantasy-wise, except for Chris Wondolowski. And, I mean, he's a player who's not starting consistently. It's pretty much I used him successfully last weekend as a bench player because he scored in that 7-1 drubbing. He got the PK goal. That's pretty much about it that I see for San Jose. I mean, Portland's had their troubles, but they're not that troublesome that I want to load up on San Jose players.
Yeah. Other players that we've talked about.
There's better flyers this week.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think Zell's a great shout-out from Sporting. Jeez, I'm all over the place tonight. I think Zella is a great shout-out for Columbus this week. You might be able to take a chance on Orlando, but I think like you were saying, Mike, I think there's better people. You're looking at Orlando against Chicago.
I thought hard about Nani. Nani's had a few low games, but Chicago's defense.
Yeah, they've given up some. So I just feel like there's some better players, but I can totally understand Nani, or if you were trying to get some budget out of there. Miami, I know we've talked about some of their new players. I think they're they're tempting as well. Minnesota has some new players that might be tempting. Midfield's a little weird for Minnesota, and Houston's done okay at home. I know we kind of bet against Houston some, but I think Figueroa actually has some great defensive bonus points this year. But Houston's a little bit better at home, so I didn't quite move towards some of those Minnesota midfielders. For those of you who may have others on the mind, let's go to forwards. Andrew.
I have Gustavo Bo. I have Josie Altidore, who, interestingly, is the most underperforming player in terms of expected goals in the league right now. So I'm sure his fantasy scores are terrible, but he's relatively cheap because of it. And, he's getting in good spots, getting good chances, just hasn't finished them. And, DC sucks, so worth a shout. And then on my bench, I have the quintessential bench player, Jordan Morris.
Quintessential. The Bo pick surprises me. Are you? I know he's had some rough times, especially since Heel has left. No worries from that loss of production.
It's mostly a bonus points pick.
Sure.
From a forward, he's about the highest bonus point producing forward that you can find around. So he's in.
Well, he's been playing almost more of like a midfield deeper role. I wonder if he actually gets moved up if Lee Win, who got traded to.
Oh, that's a great
Revs,
point. That's a great point.
If maybe he'll resume more of a forward role, we'll have to see.
I did forget about Lee Win coming back. Yeah, that could be a great boost for them. That makes sense for that trade. All right, Blaine, who are your forwards?
Yeah, Andrew, I actually had Bo in my initial lineup, and I dropped him for Josie Altidore this week. So I'm right there with you on those few players. They're kind of occupying that same spot for me. I needed a cheaper one. I'm rolling out Pavone again. I think this team's set up to do some damage against Colorado, so I'm going to try it again. And then I've got to have Zardes out there again. I mean, playing Nashville defenses look pretty good, but I got to have Zardes out there this week.
Quick clarification real quick. We had it from Ari in chat. Mike, do you know an injury status on Zelarayan? Because he did not feature last week and was not on the bench.
I mean, the reason I didn't pick Zelarayan is because I have no idea what's going on.
Okay.
I'm assuming it's still the ankle injury that he's gone in and out, but I mean, he's rotated in and out, and predicting his availability has been very difficult. And to me, it's put me off of a lot of Columbus players in general. I mean, that's one of the reasons I don't have Zardes on my team. Is I don't know if Zelarayan seems to make a difference. I mean, Columbus probably should have lost. They should have lost that game against Chicago without him. And then I don't remember if Pedro Santos came off hurt or if he just pretended to be hurt for 5 minutes. I don't remember if he actually came back on and what he did. But yeah, I don't know.
Oh, good call. Thanks, Ari. Missed that tidbit last week, so I will take a step back on Columbus there. Mike, who are you looking at for forwards?
All right, so on my bench, I have Abobasi, still 5.6, kind of come down from MLS's back, but we just talking about how bad San Jose is. If Valeri plays 2 games, I think Abobasi will get a goal somewhere in there. And at 5.6, it's easy to have him on my bench and to come in. And then on my field, I have Friz from Philadelphia Union, easy to swap out if Abobasi does well in one of the games. And then I have Jordan Morris. He's also kind of easy to swap out if Abobasi just goes absolutely crazy. I can make a choice between him and Friz. But he did really well against LAFC in their last game. Andrew talked about how they seem to have trouble with guys running in behind, and it's either going to be Rui Diaz or Morris. So I went with the cheaper option.
Yeah, makes sense. I also had Morris starting for me. I like that production. It was a lot of the stats I was looking at with he and Rui Diaz. They're right there. They're right there. And so again, this one was like a value deal. I was like, I can go with Morris, and he's been great with his what he offers, especially there. On the wing. So I like that. So I went with Morris. I also have Rossi right now. Not sold on this. I know there's been a lot going on with LAFC. Their defense is horrid, like you were saying, Andrew, but they have been getting getting goals. But I mean, Rossi didn't do great last round. I was thinking about maybe this would be a BWP round where he's sort of the cheaper of the three. So that's really in flux for me. So I was interested to hear what your guys' take on Josie, which makes total sense against DC. And I don't know why I wasn't thinking about that before. But I have Rossi at this moment right now. I was a little down on Bo, but you guys also, I think that's a great point to make about Lee Wynn coming in to see how he will feature in. And Andrew has nailed it. That's why I think a lot of us kept Bo on our teams even without Carlos Heel, is because he does have that potential to earn those bonus points, which is so crucial for a very valuable fantasy forward who doesn't always score. If they score all the time like Vela, then what do you care about bonus points? My third forward spot is just a scrub player, because that tends to be what I do. Is I tend to have a scrub defender and a scrub forward and use that for my switches. But maybe I'll do it for the midfield this time. I don't know. I was struggling with Memo, so maybe I'll go with three forwards this week. Other forwards, I think you mentioned Pavone, Blaine. I think that's good, but with Chicharito back in the mix, I'm just curious what's going to happen with LA and with Dos Santos back in. Like I'm just, that chemistry is different now, and so I was a little wary of that. Plus, it's so late in the week. I wanted a little bit more earlier game coverage just to see some points, but I get it. Pavone's a fantastic player, so I like that so much. Some of these cheap guys, like with Orlando, I know. I think you can splurge on a Jordan Morris or somebody this week and not go with some of those super cheap options, or just go with two forwards and get two high quality forwards instead of trying to get some of the cheap ones. I struggle with the Boba Mike because we have had that drop off in the form, so I just was not sure about that. I don't see anybody in chat. Let's see, Andrew, did you get to talk back about your defenders that you mentioned earlier? Oh, that's for our next segment. New segment! Here's our new segment. Da-da-da. This is why we have Andrew. He was voluntold on. We have a new segment for the player pick section, and that is bench options. So, Andrew mentioned this. I thought it was a great idea. This is more than just budget. This is not just who's the best 5 million, 6 million guy to put on your bench you might play. This is really thinking about your bench, who are viable options. I know last week I had Ziegler on my bench who was 9 million, and he came in, or he didn't come in, so that was fine because he only got 4 points. So this is really what are we thinking about for our bench, or some players that we're going through our heads for who could be on our bench for switcheroos, or who games we just want to preview for an auto-roo, things like that. So, Blaine, do you want to go first?
Can I actually lead off?
Oh, you okay? I didn't know if you wanted to round it off. Yeah, go ahead. Lead it off and give any other explanation you want for it.
Yeah, so my thinking on why I threw this out to read in the first place was I was just looking at people's benches that they have, and there seems to be kind of two leading strategies that people have on their bench. They either just pick the guys with the earliest game, and whoever plays the first game in the week, you're the bench player. So if they score well, you can scrub somebody out from your starting 11 and just get the bench points. Or people just take the cheap guys, the spot starter that normally doesn't play, and that's the bench player. And if they do well, then you scrub somebody out, and oh well. But I think that's not the right way to be using our benches anymore. I think the correct way to be using our benches and the switcheroo options that we have is to purposefully pick the players that are boom or bust players. So like Jordan Morris, I called him the quintessential bench player for fantasy. Just using him as the example, he's played 7 games for fantasy. 4 of those games, he's scored 3 or fewer points, complete duds, absolute nothing. And then the other 3 games, all of them have been 12 points or higher. So there's no in between with him. And there's a lot of these players around the league. A lot of forwards, a lot of wingers. Blaine's favorite, Giassi Zardes. He's my other quintessential bench player. Like if you like the matchup, I would start him on my bench because he's either going to score you a goal or he's going to get a 2, maybe a 3 if he gets lucky. And there's these players all around the league. You've got guys like Kevin Molino, same thing, 8 games, 4 complete duds, 3 games where he scores double digits. You've got Pedro Santos, 8 games, 4 duds, 2 games with double digits, and 2 mediocre games. So circling back to my 2 defender picks for this week, you've got Adnan in Vancouver, who,
I get that.
I'm not going for a clean sheet there, but if he gets one, great. But he's got 6 games, 4 duds, and 2 double-digit games. He provides an attacking threat that I think he has the ability to score 12 or more points in any given game. Just, the off chance of a clean sheet or, his actual attacking ability. Ziegler is another really, really good bench play. He takes PKs, takes a couple free kicks. He almost scored one this last weekend. Dallas is one of the best defenses statistically in the West. So, the clean sheet chances there as well. So I think we need to start picking these guys that have the ability to just absolutely explode and go off in any given game. Instead of just picking, oh, you're my worst player, you're relegated to the bench, or you're my earliest game, so I'll just wait and see what you do. So that's my contribution to the tactical side of fantasy for this year.
No, I love that.
Thoughts?
No, I think it's great. Blaine.
That's wonderful. Because that's kind of, I do a hybrid of those two. I love I love taking an early player, especially a defender, to see that clean sheet and whatnot. But what you're talking about is kind of the old Otteroo logic. You put 2 guys on your bench and you want the higher of those 2 scores. Now, if you've got 3 guys that play early enough on your bench and they all 3 hit, of course you're going to go scrub somebody out of your lineup. Like you get that option. You get the full 3-man switcheroo. You can take people off your 11 to make sure your bench guys get to come in, and that's great. But I love what you say about Morris and Zardes. Like, those are 2 guys you can stash on your bench in a 1-2 forward situation. You throw out a guy you know is going to get good bonus points, and then you throw Zardes and Morris both on your bench, and you let the higher of the 2 scores go. There's a lot of value in that, and I almost never pick players based on their cheap, and I'm hoping they do something. I usually pick somebody who's got a really high ceiling and a really low floor and try to get that boom on there. And then I usually pair them with somebody who's got a little more average score, a little better floor. And then I know I'm going to get something acceptable out of those 2 players when they come in. If they play early, that's great. But sometimes it's all about just getting the timing down. And you can't always get the timing, so you throw 3 guys on there, put 2 scrubs on the field, and hope for the best. And if they're early enough and they all miss, use whatever budget you have to go switch somebody out. But the old Otteroo rules really do apply here, and it's making sure you've got value for those spots and somebody who can get you points. Because there's too many lineups that come out that we see from post-match week scores that somebody had a 2-point bench and didn't get anything out of it, and they had a couple of guys not play. Like, you missed the lineup this week with Zeller Ion. You need somebody on your bench that's actually playing, not a scrub that's just there to fill a spot.
Yeah, I love this. I love this take on the players. For this week in particular, I think other names to throw out. We've mentioned Crowlard already with RSL, that he's one that kind of has this boom or bust, or at least this high ceiling, if you want to think of it that way. Anyone who's listening, if you're thinking of trying to find the players right there. Nani, that Mike mentioned, would probably be a good shot this week with Chicago. And what this means to me is, I think this makes Philadelphia players crucial in the setup, because there's quality with Philadelphia. You have Gaddis, you have Blake, you have Aronson, you have Shabilko, you have lots of guys. You have 4 players right there in each key position who you could easily go with Robles, go with Zobek, go with Diop if you think you're going to get something crazy with Vancouver. Actually, don't go with Diop because he's going to mess up your Philadelphia idea. But you've got Philadelphia at this last game, high chance of a Montreal rotation, quality team in all these positions that you could have someone come in easily if these bench players didn't work. I think this is a great way to do this. For me, I look at Hollingshead like that as well. As you mentioned, Ziegler, I like the offensive, the consistent offensive, where Ziegler's on set pieces and lots of that. Hollingshead's moving up there a lot, and he's been a player for me that's been fantasy rewarding in the past. He's come through me a lot. A lot of how Barrios has been a player who has been a fantasy nightmare for me in the past. So I say
Barrios, another classic bench player where he's
Yes.
either going to get you,
Yes.
8, 12 points, or he's going to get you 2. Nothing in the 4, 5, 6, okay, good enough range.
Yeah, no, and Adnan is another fantastic. I mean, he is probably the only Vancouver player I would consider, because he also has some of those set piece duties as well that he's involved in, and the bench is the perfect spot from him. I got a comment from chat. What about Alvarez from Galaxy? Would you call him?
He's too much of a rotation risk.
Yeah, okay.
They keep trying to play Rolf Felcher at right back and Araujo up at the right wing, which is where they've also been rotating in Efra. So if he starts, I mean he's talented. He can create moments of magic, but I just don't think he's going to have enough regular minutes to trust him.
Mike, any thoughts from you on this? Any other players to throw in there?
I mean, the thoughts that I have on this, in general, I use it as more of a boom and bust for defenders, because I think clean sheets are harder to predict. Also, it's a little bit easier to do with defenders because typically in the past they've been cheaper, and you're really kind of hunting the clean sheet, so it's more of a general boom and bust. The other thing is, generally forwards, we don't want to do this because you want to pick forwards who have more bonus points. It's kind of more of a thing this year where almost all the forwards that you're picking are generally boom and bust. I mean, other than Bo, is there anyone who's really been putting up consistent bonus points? I mean, kind of go through the ones we've talked about. Rudy is, Morris, Zardes.
Shabilko's probably been the next one of the more reliable forwards.
Shabilko is probably the only other one. So this is a year kind of, I think it's where that strategy that Andrew's talking about, essentially using boom and bust on forwards, maybe a few midfielders. The only drawback that I was thinking of is that's a lot of money to put on the bench. That's one of the reasons why I generally do defenders, is because it's cheaper to have more, and you can play around a little bit easier with defenders. Now, this year the prices have been a little bit more expensive, so that gap is a lot narrow, which makes Andrew's strategy a lot more viable. But
yeah, and if one of your expensive bench players does hit, then you get to scrub out one of your field players, and then you can boost upgrade the rest of your guys, which I've been lucky enough to do the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. I mean, example for me, I had Ziegler on my bench last week, who was 9-something then. I also had Reynoso on my bench last week, who was in the 7s. So, I mean, this isn't, like we said at the beginning, this isn't the value players that are just cheap in my play. I mean, these mid-range guys who could easily come in there, knock it out of the park. I got 8 points off of Reynoso, and he was on my bench and swapped in for Freeman. So I think that was an excellent example of how this could work right there. Or even better, Andrew 61 points off his bench. So that's the best example right here. No, I think that's a great tip, and let us know if you like this part. We'll try to add this in some more, just highlighting these boom and bust. Maybe we'll call it boom and bust. Maybe we'll call it the bench options. But just let us know what you think of this section, because I thought that was fun, and I like that take on the defense. Let's wrap this up with captain picks. Mike.
I have it on tighter right now, but I'm not confident about that one.
Well, understandable. Andrew.
I'm on Pozuelo at the moment.
Blaine?
I have no idea who, so I've got it on Zardes for now.
Of course you do. Yeah, I'm equally kind of confused with this one. I don't have Pozuelo in my team right now, but I'm rethinking that because it's DC, so I don't know what I was even thinking when I made this. But I have it on Valeri right now because I want to see what he's going to do, and then if it wasn't Valeri, then I would I don't know, flip a coin, struggle, pray, I don't know, but right now I have it on Valeri because I hope he is going to start that first game and the second game and destroy San Jose and do a mortality finishing move during their mirror match.
How much Mortal Kombat have you been watching?
I love Mortal Kombat. I've got my wife and I will play the video game, so I remember very fondly playing Mortal Kombat on the Game Gear at my friend's house. So I'm old like that.
Game Gear, oh man.
Yeah, he had a Game Gear. Played it at the arcade. We did that as well, but I never liked the It was big, but I like the handheld. That's what it was. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle arcade game. Not the podcast to talk about this on. What am I doing? We need to wrap this thing up. Thank you so much, guys, for listening to us tonight. I hope this has helped you get some ideas going for your teams for Wednesday, September 16th, when everything locks. The kickoff is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time with FC Dallas versus Colorado Rapids. Two teams I think you want to look at this round if you're going to be doing some double game week teams. I think you have some options right there. But definitely make sure you have your lineup set. Thank you so much for listening tonight, guys. Any final plugs from you all here? Andrew?
Nothing from me.
Blaine.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah,
Good to see you
pleasure.
again.
Blaine?
Nothing new for me.
Mike?
Nothing new from me.
All right, guys. Check everything out at the Discord at Fantasy Boss, and good luck next week. So thank you very much. Good luck.